She's also Bachi down. And that's some. And they
Half a second. Firstly, allow me to complete with him.
Yeah, chalo.
चलो नाराज भी आ गई
Honored guest, Justice Rohinton Nariman, Chairman and Trustees of the Bombay Parsi Panchayat, distinguished speakers on the desk, and eminent personages in the audience. On 4th November 2011, the Bombay Parsi Panchayat had the pleasure and the privilege of honoring Mr. Rohinton Nariman on his appointment as Solicitor General of India. Today, we have gathered together to felicitate this great jurist on his appointment as the new Parsi judge of the Supreme Court of India. It speaks volumes for his legal acumen that he has been elevated to the bench of the highest law body in India without first becoming a judge of any high court in the country. That's a great achievement. It's certainly a unique honor bestowed upon him by the present Union government. The high dignitary of the Government of India is in our midst. It is in the fitness of things that we commence the proceedings of this function with the rendering of the Indian national anthem. May I ask you to kindly rise. I will now read out a message from Senior Advocate Jimmy F. Pochkanawala, Mr. Godrej Dotiwala, Mumbai. Dear Mr. Dotiwala, I want to thank you and Mr. Bajo Rantia for doing me the honor of requesting me to speak at the felicitation of one of my closest friends, Mr. Rohinton F. Nariman, upon his elevation as a judge of the Honorable Supreme Court of India. Unfortunately, I will be unable to be present in person because of a previously arranged engagement in Nagpur. I will therefore be grateful if you will please do me the kindness to read out my following short message for Rohinton. Mr. Rohinton's case, especially, it can be said that this position which has been bestowed on him was an inevitable progression in his brilliant career and a foregone conclusion. I have known Rohinton and his lovely wife, Sanaya, and known them very well. I thus admire his achievements with vicarious pride. Rohinton's competence, his ability, knowledge, and phenomenal memory are qualities that we, his close friends, have over the years taken for granted in the man. I cannot think of another person who can speak with complete authority on the Avesta and comparative religions and demonstrate the same facility with history, World War II generals, Greek philosophy, and last but not the least important for the two of us on Western classical music. And all of this without any semblance of showing off. He is the genuine article. When Rohinton makes a friend, it is for life. He has real love for his friends, and this manifests itself when we get together each year without fail in December in Mahabaleshwar. And do we all let our hair down then? Rohinton's meteoric success at the bar is the stuff of legend. He has chosen to leave all this and join the bench by way of service to his country. I wish my friend the greatest success in his long sojourn on the Supreme Court bench. Signed, yours sincerely, Jimmy F. Ponchkanawala. Then there is a felicitation from the Besu Zoroastrian Parsi Anjuman Fund. They have sent a felicitation message for him. Now I'll request Mr. Dinsha Mehta, the chairman of the Bombay Parsi Panchayat, president of the Federation of the Parsi Zoroastrian Associations in India, and member of the Maharashtra State Minorities Commission. As chemical engineer by vocation, he was instrumental in the reclamation and development of India's first private port, the Nhava Sheva International Container Terminal in the Jawaharlal Nehru Port near Uran. He is actively involved in the family business of foundry, flour mills, and real estate. Amongst his interests are breeding thoroughbreds and horse racing. I now request Mr. Dinsha Rusi Mehta to give his presidential address.
Good evening, everybody. Your Honor, it's a great privilege to welcome you here on this occasion to felicitate you once again. 2011 was a glorious day when we did the same, when you were appointed the Solicitor General. And it is to your credit that because of disagreement with the Law Minister, you just resigned and took no further aims at going on with the Solicitor General, contrary to your own convictions. And therefore it's a great honor now for us to felicitate you as the Judge of the Supreme Court of India. It is quite uncommon for a son to outshine a very famous father. Yet his lordship has made the Parsi community proud by his outstanding achievements in law and life. Since a young age, he was deeply interested in our religion. He did not perfunctorily do his Nava ceremony. He tried to understand what each of the 72 Has meant before memorizing many of them, and I'm told stunning those gathered for his Nava ceremony by his fine and sonorous recitation of the prayers. Despite his great legal heritage, he evinced a deep interest in Zoroastrianism. He did not see any inconsistency between his impeccable secular credentials on one hand and his love and respect for his faith. His lordship showed great promise from his entry into the noble profession of law, which I personally regret not having entered. His stint in Bombay as a junior was short as he moved to Delhi. Bombay's loss was Delhi's gain, as he outshone his peers as one of the youngest to be designated as senior counsel in the Supreme Court of India. Recently, as a senior counsel elevated straight away as a judge of the Supreme Court without ever having been a judge of any high court, his lordship has attained this rare achievement which more than warms the cockles of all Parsi hearts. On behalf of the Bombay Parsis, I must state that you have done our community proud, our religion proud, and all your lifelong admirers proud with your great learning, sagacity, the most impeccable standards of integrity and fair play. Sir, you are truly a gem of our tiny community. Congratulations to you.
Mr. Fredon E. Divetri is a senior advocate and has a brilliant academic record and had the rare distinction of winning the Best Student Prize thrice at St. Stanislaus High School, St. Xavier's College and the Government Law College. He was awarded the coveted Sir Jamshedji Kangra Gold Medal in 1976 by the University of Bombay for standing first in the LLB examination. He is also the recipient of the Judge Spencer Prize, the Inveretri Prize and the Sir Chunilal Settleworth Prize. Was professor at the Government Law College and honorary secretary of the Bombay Bar Association. Specializes in commercial, corporate and real estate matters. Also appears regularly before various tribunals. Has been a well-known cricket commentator on All India Radio and Doordarshan for over 25 years. Many of us have heard his commentary and what a fine thing he has been doing. Now I give you Fred and Divetri.
Mr. Dinsa Mehta, the chairman of the Bombay Parsi Panchayat, Dr. Farokh Udwadia, Justice Rohinton Nariman, it sounds strange to call him that, Darius Kambata, Janak Dwarkadas, Ronnie Screwwala, Mr. Dotiwala, everybody, all my friends here. You know, when I was asked to speak today, my first reaction was, Su bolvana, Su bolo. What do I say? Not because there was too little to say or that there was nothing to say, but frankly because there is so much to say that one doesn't know where to start. What facet of this multifaceted person does one highlight at a function like this? Does one talk about his almost legendary feats in the Supreme Court, striding the corridors of the Supreme Court like a colossus, becoming the Solicitor General of India, resigning on a matter of principle, and then, thankfully for the nation, accepting the invitation that came his way for direct appointment to the Supreme Court of India, only the fifth in a line of advocates who have had that honor? Or does one talk to you about the fact that he became a Navar Martab at the Bandra Tata Agyari and learnt the 72 hours, as Dinsa has said, by heart, that he studied the Avestan script, the Avesta script, all on his own, with a little help from Professor Cusrow in New York. He studied the Gathas. He believes that they are the word of Zarathustra. He prays from them every day, and I believe attempts to live his life according to the precepts set out in the Gathas. To talk of him in one religion seems odd, because frankly he is an authority also on comparative religions. You talk of Christianity and the Bible, Islam and the Quran, You talk of Jainism, you talk of the Gita, you talk of the Mahabharata, the characters in the Mahabharata. You ask him anything on any of these subjects, and the kind of exposition you get, the kind of explanation that you get is truly phenomenal and is something so remarkable that he has studied all this, he has all on his own, he's read extensively on this and is able to expound on various aspects of religion. And then you think, at a function like this of a religion, what is the point of talking about him and religion? Let's talk about something less serious. So you begin to wonder, should I then highlight the facet of his personality, which every one of you knows, his love for Western classical music. In fact, his dream was to become the conductor of a world-famous orchestra. It's a dream he didn't fulfill. Many are the days when he has sat on the terrace of his Mount Abu building, of his Mount Abu bungalow, playing the game of classical trivial charades. Playing it like somebody reads out the cards to him and he answers. And invariably, 90 to 95% of the answers are correct, including such esoteric questions as Wagner ni Sasoni Fuinu Namso. What was his name? He will still answer it correctly. Such is his knowledge of Western classical music. And frankly, I decided that I didn't know much about music or religion, and maybe a little about law. So I was not really qualified to speak of his expertise and knowledge of the law. So how do I resolve my dilemma? What do I speak about Rohinton? And I resolved my dilemma by saying, let me speak to you today about Rohinton, the person and the friend. He is an extremely simple person. A person of extremely simple habits, a person of extremely simple needs, wants, and a very, very loyal friend. He is a true blue Babaji of the old school, if one might call him that. If one were to give him a title or an appellation, as they did in the days of old, Cyrus the Great, Alexander the Conqueror, or Alexander the Destroyer, depending on your perspective of history, if one were to give him a title, I think 3 titles would compete for acceptance. 1, Rohinton the Wise. 2, Rohinton the Just. And 3, Rohinton the Humane. Rohinton the Wise because apart from being clever, he is also an extremely wise person, and there is a huge difference between the two. He will give solutions to people who approach him for advice, not just an immediate solution. He will give solutions which are long-lasting. I've had the benefit of that advice in many matters. Rohinton the Just because he has as an article of faith. He likes to be fair to everybody he deals with in his daily life. And when I say fair and just, I don't mean that the goody-goody popular thing of rewarding people and saying nice things about them. He believes that if somebody has stepped out of line, that person should be dealt with harshly. He does not suffer fools gladly, and he does not suffer knaves at all. So, the third of them is what I believe would be the winner of the competition, Rohinton the Humane. Let me just give you one example. Many years ago, we were on a motoring trip somewhere in North India. We had reached Binsar, and it was a rainy day, frighteningly cold. We were in the car, and there was a state transport bus which stopped in front of us. A couple got down with a little child, and they obviously were lost. They had obviously got off 3 or 4 stations ahead of where they would have ordinarily got off. And they were obviously lost. There was no bus coming until the next day. So what do we suddenly hear? This military voice saying, "Come on out, all of you out." We wonder, out? Where out? In this rain, in this drizzle? Anyway, we all got out except little Khurshid, who was sitting right at the back with half the luggage falling over her. The next thing we knew was that Rohinton had asked the couple with the child to get into the car, drop them off about half an hour away or wherever they had to go, because he realized that the next bus would be on the next day or whatever. I don't know if he remembers the incident. I certainly do, but he really remembers his good deeds. I'll give you another example. any function that he has in Bombay, any party that he has in Bombay, any kind of occasion that he has in Bombay, he will always remember his old teachers from Cathedral School, Mrs. Hallegue, Mrs. Rati Modi. He looks after them in the sense that he inquires after them. And he does a lot of charity. He doesn't like to talk about it. Let me tell you, he dislikes talking about the kind of charities he does. He set up funds for the Supreme Court young advocates. If you talk to the right people in places like Abu, you realize that the extent of the kind of charity that he does at these various places, including medical charities, etc. You've been told that he has a phenomenal memory. And let me add to that to say that you ask him to name you the names of the presidents of the United States of America. He'll give them to you in chronological order, tell you what happened in each one's presidency. You ask him to tell you the names of the popes, and he'll give them to you completely telling you what happened with each pope during each papacy. And so also with the British monarchy, or with any kind of historical, because he's a great student of history and a lover of history more than anything else. And as far as the British monarchy is concerned, it reminds me of one of my favorite stories about Rohinton. A few years ago, Rohinton and Sanaya were in England, London, and they went to Westminster Abbey. Now, that is the home of the British Parliament. And there on the wall in a plaque was the names of all the monarchs listed out. So for a lark, he turned to Sanaya and he said, I'll turn my back to this plaque. I'll name all the monarchs, you correct me if I'm wrong with anything. And down the line he went all correctly till he reached one particular answer. And I said, caught you. This is wrong. How can it be wrong? They went through the rest of the list, it was perfect. He wrote to Westminster Abbey and said, look, this name of Adele which you have shown here in your list is wrongly shown. It shouldn't be shown, she was never a monarch, etc. What do you think Westminster Abbey did? Do you think that they replied and said, Mr. Nariman, please stop talking nonsense, we are Westminster Abbey, we can't go wrong. On the contrary, they replied and said, Mr. Nariman, thank you very much, you pointed out a mistake to us, we've rectified the mistake, we corrected the mistake. And if you go today to Westminster Abbey, you will find that the plaque now reads correctly at that Westminster. But you know, he doesn't only know everything there is to know about all the presidents and prime ministers and monarchs. Even he studied the legacies or the lineages of several families in Bombay apparently. Because in ordinary conversation, somebody will say, you know, Homi's Fui, done. And he'll say, no, sorry, Homi's Fui was never done, Homi's Fui was Rati. And it's always that he knows so much about so many people. He is a great mimic, let me tell you. He imitates people, he imitates voices, he imitates mannerisms, and he's superb. He has startled his own uncle, Dinsi Dastur, at the CCI once by going behind him and pretending to be the voice of his wife who was supposed to be out of Bombay. His good friend Nauroz Sirvai is here, and very often Nauroz wouldn't know whether it was his father Hormazji who was speaking or whether it was Rohinton calling out to him from the next room and imitating the voice of Hormazji. He's a very great mimic. He is also, apart from his great mind, he is also very good with his hands. Very often you are in Nainital or something and the geyser goes out. What do? You can't call for a plumber. So what do? You shout out and say, "Arey Rohinton, just see this geyser is not working." And he fidget around with some wires, ask you to hold the plier, and in 5 minutes the welcome hot water is on. So he's plumber come electrician come handyman, and of course he's also a degree Vagarna doctor, because he loves to tell people what to take when they have colds, etc. There are 3 immutables, I think, in Rohinton's life. One is his daily walk. He believes his life is incomplete without his daily walk. And he is on his daily walk regularly. Even today, realizing that because of this function he couldn't go out in the evening, he went to the US club this morning with Sanaya and had his walk. He's out and out a mountain and hill person. He is not a beach person. And in fact, when he was courting Sanaya many, many years ago, he would walk from the High Court after a full day of work very often to Mahim, where she was staying, braving the Bombay traffic, not because he wanted to save on bus fare or taxi fare, but because he believed that without his daily walk, it was pointless. The other immutable or unchangeable in his life, I think, is what, for a better word, would be his chatopani. It is his disciplined intake of alcohol, except occasionally when with very close friends on a holiday he might be a little indulgent. And he is very non-fussy about food or drink. He is very happiest if he can get his scotch with cola and wine with huge tons of ice, which is which is very disconcerting to those people who think they are connoisseurs in the field, but which just shows that he is his own man. He has recently started a collection of coins. He's taken to golf, and knowing his determination to excel in everything, I'm sure that very soon he'll be very proficient in golf. He has about 6 or 7 years more on the Supreme Court. And I, for one, believe that his appointment as a Supreme Court judge is not the culmination or the end of his achievements. I, for one, believe that this is only the start, and whichever is the government of the day or the authority in power would do well to utilize the services of such a genius for the good of the nation, and not allow this to go waste. I think when I wish him well on his tenure as a Supreme Court judge and for whatever the future holds, I think I do so on behalf of every one of you sitting here and on behalf of the entire community and the entire nation. Thank you very much.
As you all know, Dr. Farooq Udwadia has attained the acme of success worldwide as a physician. His brilliant academic record is matched only by his professional brilliance. He is a musician, a gifted speaker, and a prolific writer with a sardonic sense of humor. The crowning glory of his illustrious career came in 1987 when the Government of India bestowed upon him the Padma Bhushan in recognition of his matchless contribution in the realm of medicine. I now give you the one and only Dr. Farooq Udwadia.
Mr. Dinsha Mehta, Justice Rohinton Nariman, distinguished members sitting here on this dais, all of them, every one of them, ladies and gentlemen. I stand at a bit of a disadvantage here because I am afraid I do not know Rohinton as well as all the members sitting here on the dais. I know him well enough though. I know him in a way, however, which none of the others know. Because he was brought to me many, many months ago, I'm not quite sure when he was very ill by his father. He was flown down from Delhi and he was quite ill, and we were rather worried about him. He happened to have a bad form of malaria, and I don't know whether he knows, but I had 2 very sleepless nights over him. But when on the 3rd day we found out what he had and we knew he was going to get well, everything was nice. Well, at that time he was very docile, I must say, very mild. I met him, I think, for the first time. Very gentle, would turn round when you asked him to turn round, sit up when you asked him to sit up, cough when you asked him to cough. I say this because I was told later on that he was sometimes liable to get angry quite easily. I found him indeed very docile. Perhaps it was malaria at work. I don't know. Now, before I forget, because as I grow older I get a little forgetful, I must do what I was set out to do, namely to congratulate you, Rohinton and Sanaya, for this brilliant success, for being appointed as a judge to the Supreme Court. I would like to congratulate the whole family. I'd like to congratulate particularly his dad and mum, Fali and Babsi, whom I know rather very well. Now, I would say that I would perhaps represent the extra legal fraternity not only in this city, not only in this community, but in this city. You all heard a lot about his legal prowess, how brilliant he was as an undergraduate, as a graduate, as a postgraduate, his superb advocacy in the courts, his extensive knowledge of law, how he was a star at the bar, and how I'm sure he's going to be a star in the courts of justice in India. But let me perhaps speak about some other factors which have already been alluded to. Here is a man who became a Navar at a very early age, and perhaps his memory was honed by the fact that he had to learn so many verses by heart in such quick time. He was a religious person. Not only that, but he was a religious scholar, a scholar of religion. And anyone who is a scholar of Zoroastrianism unquestionably has to be a reasonable scholar of comparative religions as well. You can't be a scholar of one religion and know nothing or very little about other religions as well. So I'm sure he's also a scholar of comparative religions. He's also steeped in the humanities. I have always felt somehow that a knowledge of the humanities is extremely important to any professional individual. It widens his horizon, makes him look upon the world as it should be looked upon, widens his perspective, widens his judgment, and gives it an extra strength, an extra sharp strength. Now, amongst the humanities, literature, poetry, religion we've already mentioned, philosophy, and history. Now, history is also a passion with me, Rohinton. I love history too. And I think it's one of the most important branches of the humanities, if I may say so. After all, it teaches us what might have been, and it tells us what has been. I'm reminded of that famous couplet, what might have been and what has been always points to the end, which is every day present. Footsteps echo in the memory down the passage which we did not take, towards the door we never opened into the rose garden. I love those lines because they illustrate the importance of what history is to humankind. And in addition to that, his love for music. I knew he was extremely fond of music, but I didn't know he was a champion of Western classical music. I didn't know that he could recognize a tune and say it was from Beethoven, or this from Beethoven, or that from Liszt, or that from Chopin. That is indeed wonderful. It just shows how versatile an individual he is. And I must say that I got to know that he's very fond and a great admirer of Napoleon. Now that strikes a very, very vibrant chord within me, because I too am extremely fond of Napoleon. And I think Fali also is very fond of Napoleon. He often sends me books and sends me pamphlets or anything that has to do with Napoleon. Now anyone who admires Napoleon must have imbibed a certain amount of courage from what he reads, a fire in his belly, determination. And I would love one day to sit down with him and discuss some aspects of Napoleon. Now I mustn't be carried away, as I often am about Napoleon. I must not talk about Napoleon, but talk about Rohinton. But I remember very much Fali being extremely interested in the Battle of Waterloo and sending me quite a lot of literature on the Battle of Waterloo. And I'd like to tell Rohinton what I think of the Battle of Waterloo. That Waterloo was a first-rank battle won by a second-rank general. Now, let me again put together all the facets of Fali in one sentence or in two sentences. A man who's good at law, a man, as I said, who's been a star at the bar and who's going to be a greater star in the courts of justice, a man who knows the humanities, is a religious scholar, lives life in the true spirit of Zoroastrianism, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, a man who loves literature, poetry, philosophy. Put this together and you have an amalgam which is indeed extremely powerful. An amalgam which foretells that he has many more stairs to climb and he will do them extremely successfully. I only wish, I hope all of us are there at that point in time, that one day he becomes the Chief Judge of the Supreme Court of India. That is my supreme wish. I wish him, Sana, and the whole family very well and congratulate him again on his excellent record.
Thank you, Napoleon Farouk. Now we come to a very pleasant gentleman, a very kind, very hospitable, and very, very decent human being, Mr. Darius Kambata. He's our penultimate speaker. He was Additional Solicitor General of India from July 2009 to March 2012, and Advocate General of Maharashtra from March 2012 to October 2014. In spite of his attaining such stellar heights in his chosen profession, his modesty, candor, amiable disposition, and great sense of humor are matchless. Above all, the qualities of both head and heart, which he possesses in ample measure, are fully enviable. All these wonderful traits he has imbibed from his adorable parents, Jangu and Eva. Let us now hear Mr. Darius Kambata.
Rohinton Nariman, Sidin Mehta, Chairman and other trustees of the Parsi Panchayat, Dr. Parok, Mr. Pavillion, Mr. Janak Dwarkadas, Mr. Ronnie Screwvala, Mr. Dotiwala, Sanaya Nariman, ladies and gentlemen. I think this felicitation was preordained because Rohinton Nariman is one of those rare individuals who come once in a few generations. He could have excelled in just about any field he chose to career in, so versatile is his genius. We could have as well been felicitating a conductor of the stature of a Toscanini, a historian like Plutarch or Livy, a great Zoroastrian scholar like Dasturji Dhala, or even a prelate like Kansar. Rohinton is each one of these and more, as you've already been told. He was always different, always touched with greatness. From the time he was a small child, he would use incredibly complex language and phraseology. When he went to the Harvard Law School, he was nicknamed IBM for his encyclopedic mind and memory. He was clearly always the one ahead. My earliest memories of him go back to Meenu Mehta's house in Khandala in the early 1970s. Even in those days, he was the only child who could be counted upon to hold his own with the parents. He was a ringleader of sorts. Soon he was coming over to my house to listen to music with my father, who was then and remains deeply fond of him. I tagged along. It was always entertaining to be in Rohinton's company, in fact educative. Fast forward a decade or so and we were along the shady trails of Mahabaleshwar. He would lead us, as he still does, a merry band through those garden paths, and he was always a torrent of literature, art, history, religion, music. He truly imbibed the Homeric oral tradition. I remember him launching into the story of King Croesus of Lydia and Solon, the Archon of Athens. That got me fascinated in ancient history. His exposition of military history, particularly the Second World War, is as gripping as it is meticulous. I rather think that if he had been one of Hitler's field marshals, the cause of the war might well have been altered. Again, it was Rohinton who introduced me to Zoroastrianism, of which he is one of the greatest scholars. He is very modest about that. And also to aspects of historical writing on Christianity. All this with but the spoken word. And what a magnificent word it is coming from him. He can hold you spellbound. But for me, his greatest gift is his ear for music. He knows score after score backwards. He has a vast repertoire imprinted in his mind and heart. His appreciation of music is extraordinary. I mean, anyone who has sat in his music room, and I know so many of us have, is always bowled over by the depth of his knowledge, the subtlety of his appreciation, interpretation, the humongous size of his collection, and I dare say, as my learned friend Freddie has said, his utterly poor taste of drowning the finest single malts in Coca-Cola. His adherence to the oral tradition has been reflected in several lectures he's given on the influence of Zoroastrianism on other religions, on World War II, on Beethoven. Each one was tossed off with consummates and to great acclaim. Now his eclectic tastes range from the philosophical to the mechanical. The last time I was in his house, I saw a wonderful addition in his music room. It was an entire train set, complete with a steam-blowing engine, a whistling train, changing tracks, dozens of complicated structures, and you should have seen him. His eyes lit up like a child. As he flicked a switch, the train hurtled by, and then he threw a lever to switch tracks. Now, switching of tracks is what brings me to why we are all here today. He is only the 5th lawyer in India to be directly appointed to the Supreme Court. It is a signal honor, and it could have come to no one more deserving in his time than Rohinton. You must remember that it was not easy for Rohinton when he started at the bar. Being the son of a famous father never is. And the great Felicitation Nariman was then India's foremost lawyer. But Rohinton swiftly and consciously cast off that mantle. He refused to allow that to assist him in his career. A hard decision, but the correct one. And for all the favors that he sacrificed in those early years, he richly reaped the rewards of a great independent success in the years that followed. Walter Scott said that a lawyer without history or literature is a mere working mason. If he has these, he can then venture to call himself an architect. Rohinton always was an architect. His rise at the bar was he never Simla, Nainital, Mahabaleshwar, later Bombay, Pune and Goa. Now, it's often said that behind every man there is a woman. And behind every great man there is a great woman. But behind Rohinton there are 4 women. First, his charming wife Sanaya, who is his alter ego and his thermostat. It is difficult to imagine what Rohinton would have been without her. His brilliant daughter Nina, herself a budding young lawyer. His remarkably gifted and talented daughter Khurshid, who is a sculptor, an artist and a great singer. And of course Babsi aunty, his doting and talented mother. I saw her stand there on his first day in the Supreme Court looking at him with utter adulation. She of course herself is a great gourmet chef. So he had 4 women. He also had a certain man in his life who is sitting here, but that's for another day. Now during his years of practice, 2 aspects of Rohinton's character stood out for me above all else. His devotion to truth as the ultimate religion. And secondly, his directness of approach. He did not suffer fools gladly, as Freddie said. But with all great men, we have seen a great transformation of temperament on the bench. It is now universally acknowledged already that his court is the friendliest and most welcoming court in the Supreme Court, particularly for juniors. What else does Rohinton bring to his judgeship? Certainly his outstanding intellect, his easy mastery of facts, his photographic memory. Can easily be said about Rohinton. Facts fall on his mind as if on a photographic plate in their legal aspect. He has a mind that cuts itself, as Nani Palkhiwala said, instantly and to the very core of a problem as a hot knife through butter. He thinks in a lightning flash. In quickness of grasp, he has no superior among the legal brains of this country. Before you state your case, he has seen the point, and before you see the point, he has decided it. In court and in conference, he is always a mile ahead of all others. He waits for you to arrive, and when at last you catch up, you find he has already surveyed the whole area and lighted up the best parts. That's what Nani Palkhiwala said about Sir Jamsetji. I think every word is true about Rohinton today. And as with Sir Jamsetji, in addition to all this, Rohinton brings to his life and his practice, purity of the mind, heart and soul. He is a true Zauta. A great judge, to my mind, needs three qualities. First, a desire to do justice and the forensic skills to do that within the bounds of the law. Second, the strength to forbear both intellectual and pecuniary temptation and to resist pressure and influence. And the third is what differentiates a judges have to decide constitutional law. They must at least bring to their practice, apart from a knowledge of the books that have been written on the law, a passing acquaintance with Shakespeare and Milton, with Thucydides, Carlyle, Homer, Dante, etc. And Rohinton brings much more than a passing acquaintance. He brings a deep knowledge. A great judge has to expand the contours of the law and envisage new doctrines and philosophies. He has to be a game changer. I think Rohinton is certainly going to be a game changer. He has every one of these qualities in abundance. We can, I think, expect a veritable feast of law and justice from him in the years to come. We've already seen bits of that. I'm not going to go into his recent judgments. We've already seen signs of that. Now, Rohinton has determined in advance already, and he's done this often in his life, what he's going to do after he retires. He is going to devote himself to all his non-legal passions. But I can say with utter confidence that his retirement will not be like the great composer Rossini, who by the age of 37 had written about 40 operas, many of them masterpieces. He then stops composing except for some minor works. Died at the age of 76. And between 37 and 76, all he did was live the good life. He was a great gourmand. He created several dishes and culinary masterpieces, including Tornadoes Rossini. That Rohinton will not do. Instead, I have no doubt that he will turn to the one field which cries out for his intervention, the Zoroastrian religion, of which he is truly a master. He has so much light to shed. And judicial success, to my mind, is a direct result and consequence of his scholarship of music, religion and history. We are all so proud of what he's achieved and we keenly anticipate what is to come. I think the stage is set for the judicial history of our country with him on the Supreme Court. So finally, all I can offer is all the goodwill I have, and I can see so much goodwill for him in the community as well, and perhaps a word of advice taken from Polonius in Hamlet. Give each man thy ear, but few thy voice. Take each man's censure, but reserve thy judgment. Thank you.
The next speaker is Ronnie Screwvala. In the world of entertainment, Ronnie Screwvala, founder of Unilaser, holds a commanding position. Ronnie Screwvala is a first-generation entrepreneur who pioneered cable TV in India, built one of the largest toothbrush manufacturing operations, and went on to create a media and entertainment conglomerate, UTV, spanning television, broadcasting, digital, mobile and motion pictures, which he divested to the Walt Disney Company in 2012. Demonstrating an innate ability to merge creativity with commerce, Newsweek termed him the Jack Warner of India. Esquire rated him as one of the 75 most influential people of the 21st century, and Fortune magazine as Asia's 25 most powerful. Can we have some pearls of wisdom from school? Ronnie was incidentally his classmate in school.
You took one of my lines away, sir.
Thank you for the Parsi Panchayat having me here. Sanaina and Rohinton, it's an absolute honor and a privilege for me to be here. This is one of those few days when I kind of regret having changed my name from Rohinton to Ronnie. Because at least I would have said I have a common name and I share it with a common friend like Rohinton. Actually, only my mother and dad now still continue to call me Rohinton. For me, actually, it's much more a flashback than all the esteemed people who've spoken here. I think the good part is that the last or the second last speaker can always be a little bit more brief. So my memory goes back more than 45 years back. When I was in a school called Dunn's Institute, and in the 7th standard, I moved to the Cathedral School. And I think one of the first people who I became friends with and a colleague was Rohinton, because we shared the same desk in one of the standards. 3 months or 4 months later, after having changed school for the first time, I came down with a very bad attack of jaundice. Ironically, Dr. Parokutwadia treated me. I don't think you'll remember that, because that was very, very long ago. And I was in hospital for 3 months. And everyone was alarmed that here I was, having changed schools. What am I going to do? How am I going to do that? And the savior was Rohinton. I don't know whether he remembers that. Because my mom came back and my dad came back and said, don't worry, he's making all the notes and he's going to give it to you in a very systematic manner. And then we're going to catch up everything that you've lost out in those 3 months. And I think that kind of epitomizes my memories of those very early days. Because there was always something there from every single aspect. His element of giving, his element of friendship. Of course, he took my surname and twisted it enough during those early days, calling me Screwball, Screwy, anything else to get me up into a spot from time to time. But being a co-ed school, I couldn't let him have his day because we obviously had to score out there with the ladies also. But I think my weekends after that, and when I recovered and then we became stronger friends, were at his place in Hampton Court, where his dad's study would be there. And then outside of that, next to it, would be his bedroom. And I think it was either Friday nights or Saturday nights that we'd spend across. And he was pursuing his knowledge and his to be an hour. And I think if I stayed on and wore my Sadra and Kasti for almost 2 or 3 more years than I think I would have, I have Rohinton to thank for that. Because it was during those early days of him sharing his absolute passion for everything. And all I can say here and reiterate for everyone who's spoken today is that when he zeroes in on something, from those early days, there was one thing very clear, his laser-sharp focus and his laser-sharp passion for anything. And I think from that day onwards, whether he's taken that for the Zoroastrianism, for classical music, and of course for law, which at that stage, I think was not something that one would have been able to second guess, other than his oratory skills at that time. I think over the next many, many years, we lost touch. But the beauty of Rohinton, and I think backed by Sanaina, is the fact that his humility stands out clearly. Almost 35 years later, I think we exchanged an SMS to get together. And he called me over to his house in Delhi, and then we met again for dinner at my place. And it was as if no time had elapsed. And I think those really are things that talk about a human being and a person. And I think this country is going to be richly, richly, richly enriched with having him in the courts of justice. Rohinton, I wish you all the very, very best, and thank you for having me here.
Mr. Janak Dwarkadas hails from a family of eminent lawyers, has been practicing as an advocate in the High Court of Judicature at Bombay on the original site since October 1977. He specializes in corporate law, intellectual property rights, commercial litigation, international arbitration, and environmental protection. I will call upon Mr. Janak Dwarkadas to address this vast gathering.
Rohinton, as I would like to refer to them instead of Justice Nariman, trustees of the Parsi Panchayat, Mr. Dinsha Mehta, Mr. Dotiwala, friends on the dais, ladies and gentlemen. Success and wealth, as they say, have a corrupting influence on the minds of the most sane individuals. It requires tremendous strength of character to let neither or both of these achievements let your feet be swept away from the ground. Ro, as we have affectionately called him, is however amongst the exceptions. Neither the name Nariman nor achieving Parsi priesthood at a very young age, nor the honor of graduating from Harvard University, nor the extremely successful legal practice, that too in the highest court of the land, nor appearing in more than 500 reported cases in the Supreme Court, nor being made a senior counsel by the then Chief Justice of India by relaxing the age bar to accommodate him, nor being appointed the Solicitor General of India, nor being elevated to the Supreme Court of India as one of the only 5 members of the bar to be directly appointed, as we have been told, nor having acquired the luxury of owning 5 or 6 beautiful homes in some of the most exotic locations in India, have brought about the slightest change in the Ro that I knew when I first met him in the early 1980s and the Ro of today. A rare feat indeed. Shakespeare has said, some people are born great, some achieve greatness, and some have greatness thrust upon them. Ro has the unique distinction of being all 3. So what does it take to be a Rohinton Nariman? Actually, it's quite simple. You have to be a child of a special God. Just like a cow has 4 stomachs, I would say Ro is quadri-brained. I have yet to come across any human being like Ro who has 4 distinct segments in his brain. One for law, one for religion, one for history, and yet another for Western classical music. We, children of a lesser God, may excel in one or the other. Ro excels in all 4. Let me share with you my personal experiences to illustrate what I have just said. Regarding his knowledge of the law, long before personal computers and laptops were invented, Ro already possessed what we now call the copy-paste function in his brain. In the 3 years that he was in Bombay, after he began his counsel practice, he spent all his free time in chambers reading up the law reports of the Supreme Court ever since its inception, para by para, page by page, volume by volume. Being gifted with a photographic memory, if you were to ask Ro, which judge of the Supreme Court, in which para of which judgment had what to say, you would not find Ro wanting. Believe me. Combined with his ability to read his briefs vertically rather than horizontally, as we would all do, and being able to recall all the facts at will, he was regarded as one of the most formidable lawyers in the Supreme Court. As regards his knowledge of religion, we've already heard my friends here talk about it. He, when he was just a boy, when other boys his age were struggling with homework from school, at the age of 13 was anointed an hour, and for most of you who are present here today, it meant learning by rote reams and reams of Parsi prayers. But his interest in knowledge of religion is not confined to the Zoroastrian faith alone. As we have been told, Ro has done a deep and incisive study of various other faiths and religions, and can easily be called a scholar in comparative religions. As regards his knowledge of history, I must share with you a very personal experience I had. We were once in Mount Abu, Freddie, Darius, Ro, and myself, at one of Ro's holiday homes. Early one Sunday morning, accompanied by the Raja of Sirohi, the erstwhile princely state of Sirohi, the four of us left for a tour of the valley which circumnavigates Mount Abu. We were to explore and admire some of the world's oldest religious places of worship which dot the valley below. I'm talking of the temples of the Hindus, the Jains, and the Buddhists. But what followed thereafter was the most astounding jugalbandi that I've ever witnessed. Not in Indian classical music, but in the knowledge of world history. This between the Raja and Rohinton. There was not a war, not a king, nor a queen, a monarch, or even smaller battles which may have been fought ever since recorded history, which Rohinton could not recollect, with the month, the year, the length of the war, and the principal protagonists involved and the cause of the war with absolute accuracy. Of course, not to be outdone, my friend Darius did not fare too badly at all. As for me, by the end of the day, I was just happy that I was not appearing for a history exam the following day. When I asked Rohinton how he even got the time to acquire all the knowledge, he drove us to the top of a steep hill just behind his Mount Abu bungalow, where, like a hermit on the hill, he would closet himself in a tiny room full of books, and he would read those for days on end, unconcerned with the happenings in the rest of the world. As regards the knowledge of Western classical music, again, on the same trip, one evening I asked Rohinton what he would have done had he not been a lawyer. Back came the answer, a conductor. Being a complete ignoramus when it comes to Western classical music, like in most other matters of the world, I asked Rohinton to explain what exactly a classical music conductor does. I always thought until then that music conductors were highly temperamental people who broke their batons at the least possible provocation. What Ro explained to me about the role of a conductor left me with no doubt that only the exceptionally gifted Ro could have been a conductor, and an extremely successful one at that, had he become one. He told me that a conductor has to know the entire musical score of the symphony or the piece of music that was to be played by an orchestra virtually by heart. A good classical music conductor would have committed to memory several symphonies and could, whilst listening to the rendition of one by a particular orchestra, critically compare the rendition of the same note by note extremely easily. I have witnessed Rohinton enjoying listening to a Western classical music performance screened on a giant wall in his bedroom in his Delhi residence. From the expressions on his face and the level of his concentration, I could sense that he, unlike me, was probably listening to a note being played by the sixth violinist in the fourth row of the orchestra. Soon after Rowe was elevated as a judge of the Supreme Court, I asked him whether he would have the patience to deal with the laborious arguments of long-winded or inexperienced lawyers who often appear in the Supreme Court. He told me that he had decided that he was going to model his judicial career on the lines of Justice Marden. In other words, he was going to enjoy his time on the bench. From all the reports I have heard thus far, particularly from junior lawyers who have appeared in his court, he is doing exactly that, whilst churning out some of the most path-breaking judgments. This only goes to establish Rowe's resolve and commitment to the cause. Well, that is Rohinton. I doubt whether there will ever be another one. I feel proud to have been his friend and privileged to felicitate him this evening. God bless. Thank you.
After all the rich tributes paid by the distinguished speakers to the Honorable Mr. Justice Rohinton Nariman, we are all eagerly awaiting the response from this legal luminary of our community.
Mr. President, members of the Parsi Panchayat, Dr. Udvadia, my very, very dear friends, I to Gernu Gambarcha. Don't believe a word they've said. When I was before you last, Daddy will recall, Daddy engineer that is, that he quipped and said, that I must ask you what exactly a Solicitor General means or what it is. It is neither Solicitor nor General. And I quipped back and said, yes, that's exactly like the Holy Roman Empire, neither holy nor Roman. Now, however, I am before you as a judge. And Diksha was told that I would have preferred to have the function yesterday. Now, yesterday, as you know, is the 30th of January. So he immediately shot back and said, no, this was the day on which the great Mahatma was killed. I have a sneaking feeling that he wanted to avoid the 5th great disaster on this day by having me speak. Because there were 4 earlier great disasters. Charles I had his head cut off on this day in 1649. Number 1. Number 2, Franklin Roosevelt was born. A great disaster to the Republicans and to Nazi Germany in 1882. And above all, Hitler came to power on this day in 1933. So, very deftly and adroitly, the 5th great disaster was avoided. And I am now here before you on 31st, fortunately. Now it's amazing that the number 5 has had a great deal to do with this appointment of mine. You've already been told that I have been the 5th in direct succession in terms of lawyers who have been appointed directly to the Supreme Court. It's correct. Also, I must tell you, I happen to be the 5th Parsi to have been appointed on the Supreme Court. My very first appearance before the Supreme Court was when I appeared before 5 learned judges, a constitution bench. Unfortunately, after 2.5 days of struggle, one lost the case, and I still feel the loss because I felt I lost strongly. And strangely enough, the very first bench on which I sat, 5 judges. Again, first judgment I have delivered on behalf of 5 judges. And there's one more 5 waiting in the wings. This is the fourth number 5. The 5th number 5 is that in the great tradition of Parsi priest turned lawyer, I am number 5. What a magnificent tradition that is. Sir Dinsha Mullah at the peak. Can you imagine this great man not only was involved and actually practiced every facet of the profession. He was a solicitor, started as a solicitor, founded the great firm of Mullah and Mullah. Went on to be a successful practicing counsel. Went on then to become a judge of the Judicial Committee of the Privy Council. And above all, wrote the great Mullah treatises on virtually every aspect of civil law. In fact, so brilliant were those treatises that his book on Hindu law was made by a certain ruler of a princely state, the law of that state. So that if Sir Dinsha Mullah, in a footnote, thought the judgment was wrong, the footnote was law. The judgment was not law. This was my first great forebear. The second great forebear was Sir Jamshedji Kanga, the man you heard of, the doyen of this great bar. Everybody who's anybody has emanated from him. He was an extremely simple Parsi priest. He lived extremely simply. He had a house which was almost bare. He probably had one table, one chair, one bed. A mind like a bell. And like Sir Dinsha Mullah, officiated as a judge as well for about 2 years. And there's a very interesting judgment he wrote on the workings of the stock exchange, which we can still usefully allude to, reported in 1922. The third great forebear is my dear friend Navroz, who's with us today. His great father, Sir, the great Homi Silvai. Not only was this man again an exemplar of everything great that our profession has, brains, courage, ability, probably the master authority on constitutional law, that is world constitutional law. I don't think anybody would equal or rival his knowledge of world constitutional law, which includes the great constitutions of the British North America Act, Canada, the Australian Constitution, the Irish Constitution, etc., etc. Of course, the US Constitution, and then our own. And number 4, of course, is, and I must tell you that even though Homi Silvai, unlike the others, did not become a judge, he was one above. He judged judges in his book. And he had certain pet dislikes. And those pet dislikes really had it. Because every time they delivered something, Homi Silvai went at them. Very often rightly. The 4th great forebear is the great Dinsha Manan, who I have the greatest respect for. A man who stood up when the chips were down. During our emergency, you'll remember, there were some 9 articles which the censor had prohibited. And as you remember, Article 19, including the right to freedom of speech, was suspended. Madan had the guts in Minu Masani's case at the height of the emergency to say that the censorship order was wrong and to strike it down. Something which, unfortunately, did not do in the great habeas corpus case. And in the space of just 3 years, this great man delivered some 40 judgments in the Supreme Court. Mind you, he was a junior judge almost throughout because he was appointed at age 62, almost 62. And everybody retires at 65. But in 3 years, he wrote some 40 judgments on diverse subjects, each of which is a tome, a masterpiece, thoroughly researched, very, very thoroughly and beautifully delivered. Now, what exactly does it mean to be a Supreme Court judge? You may well ask me. It has been said we are final not because we are infallible. We are infallible only because we are final. That is something awesome. Now, the burden on a Supreme Court judge, on a modern day Indian Supreme Court judge, is enormous. For every Monday and Friday alone, we have barrels of papers that come to us. We are supposed to be ready in anywhere up to 70 diverse cases. One may be excise, one may be income tax, one may be criminal. And either the matter gets dismissed once and for all, in which case infallibility sets in, it's over. Or it is admitted to be heard in future on another day. Quite apart from this backbreaking load, on Tuesdays, you have what are called after notice matters, which are matters to be heard finally, which could perhaps be disposed of within, say, an hour or so. And then on Wednesdays and Thursdays, we have the whole backlog, which we then have to listen to. And apart from listening to all this for 4.5 hours, we then go home and deliver judgment. I belong to a court which perhaps has the greatest relevance to the people of India or to the people anywhere in the world because of one particular article in our constitution, Article 136. It is so wide that we can deal with any judgment, order, determination, interim or otherwise, from any court or tribunal in the country. You can come straight up. It's another matter that we have certain rules which we have laid down for ourselves, which are rules of practice, that we will or will not interfere given X or Y situation. But the jurisdiction is vast, the powers are great, and above all, this is a court which has held constitutional amendments to be void. So great are the powers that are vested in us. And with these powers comes circumspection, comes introspection. And it is very, very important to realize, and here we now move on to the great Adarpad Maraspan. Most of you will have heard of him. He was a great chief priest who lived during the time of King Shapur II. Now, King Shapur II happened to belong to one of our great Persian dynasties, the Sasanian. And it is said that he was actually crowned in his mother's stomach because his father died when the mother was pregnant. The older boy, a boy called Adar Narse, was passed over. And the imperial diadem was actually put on the mother's stomach. And he was crowned while actually inside his mother's womb. So he's been in the purple for his entire reign, which was 79 long years. 70 long years. 309 to 379. Apart from doing many other great things, he fashioned our Kasti prayer. Now all of you as Parsis would know that the Kasti prayer itself is in either 2 or 3 languages depending on whether you view the Gathas as a distinct language from the younger Avesta. Interestingly, the Kemna Mazda prayer is 2 verses picked out of the second Gatha. They have a remarkable continuity of thought, and they are extremely obscure, difficult prayers. They are difficult verses. So this great man chose them. After which you have some passage from the younger Avesta, the Vendida, and a single delightful line from the third Gata. Nemascha ya admetis isacha. Nemas is to be humble. Now, this man devised this prayer, had something which you first said which you didn't understand, because in those days, the Gathic Avestan language was a dead language. And the Auramazda Khodai prayer, which is the second prayer with which you actually tie your kasti, was a prayer in the spoken language of the day, namely Pallavi. And it is so beautifully crafted that it gives you the 11 actually fleshed out forms of evil that you are to abjure, including not tolerating tyrants and not being willfully blind or willfully deaf. All this was this great man's conception. And finally you have the great confession of the faith, in which not only do you say that I am proud to be a member of this faith, but the 4 words that come in between are very important, because one of them means that you sheathe your sword. A snaitisha is a double-edged sword in those days, which you put back into your sheath. You have to be non-violent. So, this great man who crafted our prayers, I think put it extremely well, and I don't think anybody could put it better. If one could possibly live by what I am about to tell you, then, as Kipling said, the 60 seconds worth of distance run would in fact be run, and the world would be yours, and you'd be called a man, my son. Now, what are these great things that he said? The first thing that he said was that please remember, there's no point in having wisdom unless it is accompanied by courage. What's the use of being wise when it is not translated into something which will benefit humanity? The second great thing he said, and this again another speaker touched upon, what's the point of being intelligent unless you have vision? You must look forward, don't look backward. The third and very important thing that he said is, equally, when we speak of the great triad, good thoughts, good words, good deeds, there's no point thinking good thoughts, there's no point speaking good words, unless they are translated ultimately into action, into good deeds. And finally, it is great to be wealthy, but there's no point being wealthy unless you are jealous. Now, unless one can live up to these ideals, I don't think one can be a good judge, let alone a good human being. I keep these precepts before me, I attempt to think of them, and I'm doing very hard to attempt to live by them. Thank you all very much.
Rohinton Nariman, thanks a lot for this wonderful talk you have given us. This comes to the conclusion of the speeches, but there will be a second session when all the eminent associations, Baug, colonies and Parsi institutions will be felicitating you. So we come to that stage now. But before that, I will request all the trustees of the Bombay Parsi Panchayat, may I request them to please come on stage.
Another thing the great Adarbad Maraspan said, don't sit where you are liable to be unseated. Thank you very much.
The Cusrow Sports and Welfare League Vice President Aspi Patiwala. Then on behalf of our sacred Iransha Gurdwara, Vada Dasturji, Pushet Dastur, Kekobad Dastur. Now the World Zartusti Chamber of Commerce, Mr. Aspi Antia, Chief Executive Officer. Then the next is the Zoroastrian Cooperative Bank Limited, the Managing Director Uday Shete. The Faror Foundation Managing Trustee Cyrus Dasto. Then Karagat Colony Youth Association, President Cyrus Dasto. Then President Karagat Colony Welfare Association, Mr. Hoshida Diwala. Mr. Hoshida Diwala is here? No. Then on behalf of the Indo-Iranian Friendship Society, my wife, we will regale it. Thank you. Then Seth N.H. Karani Agyari Trust and Dastur Kukadaru Memorial Trust, Managing Trustee Bombay also here. Godrej Baug Residents Welfare Association, President Farhad Hosdar. Then Panthaki Baug Welfare Center, Secretary Pervez Driver. Nicholson Charitable Trust and Kapawala Agyari Charitable Trust, Trustee Aspi Driver. Then the next is Rustam Baug Association, President Rustam Sekhna.
I'm not Rustam.
That's what doesn't matter.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Sir Nes Wadia Memorial Pavilion, Secretary Xerxes Dasto. Then Navroz Baug Play Center, ex-President Nariman Mehta. Is he there? Then Navroz Baug Maintenance and Development Committee, President Gayomat Kathawala. Then Davier Parsi Jarthosti Anjuman, President Marazban Wadia. You know the grandeur now. He's going to recite the poem.
No.
So take it right. You're coming for the other one, no? Okay. And Pariche Davierwala is the trustee there. Incidentally, she will again be doing the honors a minute later. But he wants to recite the poem. Come on.
I said, come on, Station. Malakelu Che, Wala Amdino,
કે દીપાવ્યું બાપ દાદાનું નામ, દીપાવ્યું પારસી કોમનું નામ, દીપાવ્યું બાપ દાદાનું નામ, દીપાવ્યું પારસી કોમનું નામ. દવિયેર પારસી અંજુમન કરે છે તમને હજારો હજાર સલામ. સાહેબ, તમારા વડીલ ફલી નરીમાન સાહેબ અમારે ત્યાં દવિયેર ગામમાં જ્યારે મારી પહેલાં પ્રેસિડન્ટ અમારા ખાન બહાદુર ઓરવસજી દવિયેરવાલા હતા ત્યારે અમારી દવિયેર 11 પર આવી ગયા હતા. તેવી જ રીતે અમે તમને આજે પણ 17મી એપ્રિલે અમારું વર્ષ છે 11નું 160મું તમને ઇન્વાઇટ કરીએ છીએ. પ્લીઝ ડુ કમ વિથ સનયા, યોર વાઇફ એન્ડ એવરીબડી. થેન્ક યુ.
Thank you.
This is
Then Sanjan Memorial Column, President Bepsi Davierwala. Incidentally, Rohinton's father, Fali, was my classmate in Burma. Then Iranian Zoroastrian Anjuman, President Khordadar P. Irani. Then Salsette Parsi Association, Senior Trustee Erach S. Hodawala. Erach Hodawala, તમે તો છે અહીંયા. પછી ખાન એસ્ટેટ રેસિડેન્ટ સિક્યોરિટી કમિટી ફિરોઝ અમરોલીવાલા.
This is Mr. Savak Parwalia, our senior most member of Khan Estate, and actually I feel the honor should go to him. That's why I have asked Mr. Savak Parwalia to join me. As far as the Parsi community is concerned, we have had chief justices from our community, and I can only say we wish we have one more chief justice in the future in the form of Mr. Rohinton Nariman. Thank you.
Nes Bhagat Parsi Zoroastrian Residents Association, President Fali Poncha. Mr. Rohinton Nariman has become a judge of the Supreme Court at a very young age, so he has every chance of becoming the Chief Justice. Then Bikaberam Well, Trustee Dr. Virat Kapadia. Then Zoroastrian Winter Relief Fund and Aura Support, Mrs. Utokshi Tutwala. That's right. Then next is K Caterers, Tempton and Shernaz Dumasya. And last but not the least, Nausari Malesar Bedin Anjuman, Secretary Dara Nebu.
Parsi Association Iran.
Thank you.
Bombay Parsi Association and Iran League, President Whiskey Dastur.
The federation is also there. Mozambique. Thank you.
Zoroastrian. Where is that? Federation of Zoroastrian Welfare and Cultural Association. President Adi Mehta and Vice President Misty Dastur. Thank you. WZO India, Mr. Lucy Bangara. WZO India. Anyone else? WZO India. President Mr. Lucy Bangara.
Ready?
Well, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for your tremendous patience. Now we come to the conclusion of the meeting.
That is something that I did appreciate. Another
Okay. Sir, where is your wife, Sanana?
My wife is in front, currently was in front. All the best. I am from Anand. Thank you. All the best. Thank you. God bless
Yes,